Next, we will continue by further understanding how to use the mouse in 3D Studio Max. Firstly, we need to know how to navigate across the 4 viewports in general. So we can choose the particular viewports we want to work in by simply left clicking it. Okay, for example, top view, front view, left view, and orthographic view. Similarly, we can also use the right click to select the views as well here. I personally prefer to use the right click to select the views, because if we use the left click, very often than not, there is a tendency to select a geometry by mistake, simply because we just want to select the view itself. So if you notice, if I use the left click right now and I want to move to the front viewport, if I use a left click, I end up not only selecting the viewport, but I also selected the geometry. Let me do this again. This time round, I will demonstrate to you selection of the viewport using the right click instead. Now if you notice, if I were to select the front viewport again with a right click, you will find that I will not select the geometry, but instead I will simply only activate the front viewport. And you can see that the front viewport that is being selected will be highlighted in yellow here around the frame. Okay, after this, let's figure out how to use the mouse within the viewports itself. After we figure out how to use the right click to select the various views here, now let me explain how the mouse works in general. The left click will allow us to select objects in general, and we can click and hold and drag the mouse to do a window selection here, this way. Now I want to draw your attention to this area here on window selection and crossing selection as well here. Okay, with this is crossing selection mode. Pay attention to this icon where there is a hidden line square and a cyan colored square on the outside here. This denotes a crossing selection. So notice, if I were to drag a window selection here partially, both objects will be selected if I am in the crossing selection mode. Now if I change this one to a window selection mode and I do the same thing, notice now my window selection here only cuts through the objects partially, but I am not able to select the objects. I can only select the objects upon me drawing an entire window larger or encompassing the geometries only. That means I have to drag a selection window that covers the entire geometry object before it can be selected. So these are the two key differences here that we need to pay attention to. And by default, the selection mode is set to crossing, so that only a partial selection window will be needed to select the object. Next, the middle mouse button, or the MMB. The middle mouse button will allow us to click and drag to do a panning of the view. So we can simply click and drag to pan around the scene this way. And holding the alternate key and dragging the middle mouse button, or the MMB, will allow us to rotate the scene. If there is an object selected and then we use the alternate middle mouse button, you will realize that now it is orbiting around the object. instead of, if I don't select anything and I use the alternate middle mouse button, I will be rotating around or orbiting around the scene itself, this way. So there is a little bit of a difference between selecting the object and orbiting, or not selecting the object and orbiting around the scene. And of course we will press the G key to be able to activate or deactivate the grids, as shown to you earlier. And then lastly, commonly known, the right click itself will call out a series of menus here. But this is largely dependent on whether or not you have the objects selected.